Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in this world. This is John West, back to you again with Japanese business and economy. Yes, John West, back to you again with Japanese business and economy. We're here for the third part of Class 5, Class 5C. And here we're going to have a look at the period 2020 to 2022, which were very turbulent years in Japan. They were turbulent years for most countries in the world, but particularly in the case of Japan. So, as I said, in addition to COVID-19, the years 2020 to 2022 were years of turbulence for Japan. Firstly, the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympic Games were postponed until 2021. Secondly, Japan had two changes of prime minister. It held national elections, and tragically, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated. Next, Japan's main security partner, the US, saw a change of president. And lastly, and most importantly, Russia's invasion of Ukraine made Japan fearful of security risks in Asia. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe lobbied very hard to secure the 2020 Summer Olympics for Tokyo. They were to symbolize the recovery of Japan after the 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown. The Olympics were also to be the highlight of Prime Minister Abe's leadership of Japan. So he worked very hard to hold them in 2020, despite COVID-19. In the end, the Tokyo Olympics were postponed from 2020 to 2021. The Tokyo Olympics were ultimately a great success. They were a testimony to Japan's meticulous organizational ability. The Games were also immensely uplifting for a world depressed after more than a year of COVID lockdowns and other restrictions. But unfortunately, tight COVID controls meant that the poor Japanese people could not attend the Games. And yet, they will foot much of the bill for the world's most expensive Summer Olympic Games. They cost Japan at least $15.4 billion. As we've discussed earlier, Japan has the highest public debt in the world. Around 250% of GDP is the value of Japan's public debt, and these Olympic Games will add to that debt. Moving on to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the man behind the Tokyo Olympics, resigned due to ill health in 2020. He had been Japan's longest-serving prime minister in Japanese history and one of its most activist, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. But unfortunately, he could not lead the country during the Olympic Games. Abe was tragically assassinated in July 2022, a shocking event in Japan, which has been one of the safest countries in the world. Abe was replaced as Prime Minister by Yoshide Suga, a colourless figure who had been Abe's chief cabinet secretary. As has occurred too often in the past, Suga's premiership was short-lived. He resigned due to low popularity. He had only been Prime Minister from September 2020 through to October 2021. Now, this is an important point to bear on for a moment. For long periods of time in Japan, prime ministers have lasted only 1 year in the job. We could talk about this as being a revolving door of prime ministers. And the problem of this is, or one of the problems of this is that in being in the leadership position for a short period of time, it's very difficult to actually get anything serious done. And one of the great things of Prime Minister Abe was that he was actually in power for a long period of time, which enabled him to implement many changes in the domestic policy and also be very active in international foreign policy. Now, Suga was replaced as Prime Minister by Fumio Kishida. Kishida led the Liberal Democratic Party to an election victory on 31 October 2021. The LDP rules Japan with a junior coalition partner, the Komeito Party. Now, the LDP, most importantly, is a right-wing party that has governed Japan for most of the period since 1955. That's a photo of Mr. Kishida there. Now we're going to look a little bit about the US and its relationship with Japan. Now, Shinzo Abe was actually quite brilliant in managing Japan's relationship with the US under the administration of Donald Trump. He was the first world leader to meet with Donald Trump, presented him with a gold golf club. Of course, both of them are great golfers. Now, Japan appreciated greatly Trump's hard line against China. Now, when President Biden became the leader of the US, Japan feared that Biden would be soft on China. This has not happened. On the contrary, Biden is being very tough on China. Importantly for Japan, Biden greatly appreciates US allies like Japan. That is something quite different from Trump, who criticized US allies, and in fact flattered strongmen dictators like Putin and like Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Now, the Biden administration has been very strong on security issues in Asia. It has, in fact, elevated the quadrilateral security dialogue, the Quad, to the leadership level with summit meetings. But unfortunately, and which is a great disappointment for Japan, the Biden administration is weak on trade and other economic issues in Asia. The US is not a member of any of Asia's big trade agreements, and the US contributes very little to infrastructure financing in Southeast Asia. Overall, Japan is very closely, intimately tied to the US, but it still feels very nervous about its alliance with the US. How does Japan react to this? One, Japan has to work very hard to keep the US involved in Asia, but also Japan has to work very hard to make other friends as an insurance policy, friends with Australia, India, Southeast Asia, Europe, and so on. Now, I'd like to move on to Japan's reaction to the Ukraine war. Now, when you think about it, Ukraine is a very long way from Japan. It's around the other side of the world. But Japan was shocked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Prime Minister Kishida said, "Ukraine today may be East Asia tomorrow." So Japan joined the US and other Western countries in implementing sanctions on Russia. The Ukraine war has also inspired Japan's new defense and national security strategies announced in December last year, 2022. For the first time, Japan identified China as the primary security challenge facing the country. So Japan has decided to double its defense spending from about 1% of GDP to about 2% of GDP. This increase will take place over the next 5 years. This will be an increase from $50 billion a year to $100 billion a year. This will make Japan the world's third largest defense spender after the US and China. Japanese security planners now talk about their security environment as being the worst at any time since World War II. What concerns Japan's security planners? Firstly, China's military modernization. Secondly, North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. And now, Russia is a concern for our Japanese friends. So what has changed the political context in Japan? This is the war in the Ukraine. It has had a big role in changing the political context in Japan. The Ukraine war has made the Japanese public believe that major war is possible in the 21st century. If a war is possible in Europe, it's possible in East Asia. Before Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, many of us felt that a major war like that was no longer possible. It would no longer occur. But now it's made us all wake up to the fact that a war, a physical invasion is possible. And as Mr. Kishida said, if a war is possible in the Ukraine, it's possible in East Asia. So public opinion polls in Japan show a quite dramatic shift in support for increased defense spending. And this is very important because Japan has long been a pacifist nation, has long been against military spending, military activities, but the war in the Ukraine has added to a growing list of concerns in recent years to change public opinion towards supporting a major increase in defense spending. Now, another aspect or another action to the Ukraine war is that the defense strategy, the new defense strategy, has focused on strengthening Japan's domestic defense industry. This is an industry that has not really been very competitive historically because of restrictions on exports, and they are not very well organized as a group of companies. Now, there's going to be a significant focus on trying to make Japan's defense firms more internationally competitive and seeking opportunities for Japanese defense firms to collaborate with international partners in the future. In sum, the Ukraine war is truly an inflection point for Japan and its alliance with the United States. Now, what does this have to do with Japanese business and economy? Now, the first thing is that increased military expenditure like this will obviously have an impact on Japan's massive public debt. And so that's a big effect on the economy, increased defense spending, increased public debt. On the other hand, modernizing Japan's domestic defense industry could have positive technological spin-offs for the rest of the economy. So this could be the modernization of part of the Japanese economy that has been backward, and this modernization of the defense industry could actually have a positive effect on the economy. So thank you very much for joining me for this short overview of the turbulent years from 2020 through to 2022. And if you have any comments, questions, or other reactions, don't hesitate to send me an email or to discuss these with me when we have our student discussion sessions in January. And for the moment, let me say sayonara.